welcome to your new home. I hope that you enjoy living here. I just wanted to let you know how special you are. Mrs. Craig smiled at me, then gave me a hug. Hi, my name is Tiffany. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Press the notification button so that you would be the first to see when new content comes out. After you have done that, go and hug your family and tell them that you love them, because not everyone has a loving family. I had been back at Mrs. Silver's orphanage about a year when she called me into the office and said that someone wanted to adopt me. She said that they looked like a nice couple and they didn't have any children. I thought that at the age of 13, nobody wanted to adopt me. Boy, was I wrong, and the thought of having my own space was surreal. That night, I had the most restful night I've had in a long time. The next day, Mrs. Silvers took me to the doctor's office, and I got some blood tests done. I had never been adopted before, so I thought it was standard procedure. As a matter of fact, I would have done anything not to be placed with a foster family again. I never knew my mom, and some days I wish she was around. And I comforted myself by thinking she probably had a good reason for giving up. Doesn't every mother? About 2 weeks after Mrs. Silvers told me that I was getting adopted, it was finally time for me to leave the orphanage. Hopefully, this time for good. When I got to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Craig, I was given the tour around the house. This is your room, Tiffany, Mrs. Craig said as she opened the door. But you can't redecorate it. There were portraits on the wall of a girl. She looked around 16 years old. Trophies and medals adorned the room, each one holding the name Cynthia Craig. They must have lost their daughter. It made sense that Mrs. Craig wouldn't want the room to be redecorated. The next few days were simple enough. I really didn't have anything to do since Mr. and Mrs. Craig did all the housework and cooking. Mr. and Mrs. Craig even told me that I could call them Mom and Dad if it was something I felt comfortable doing. So I did. Every day, Mom told me that I was special, and it really meant a lot to me after being told that I wouldn't amount to anything, and that if my mom didn't want me, why would anyone else? Mrs. Craig showered me with gifts and made my favorite meals. One night I was sitting in bed reading a book when I heard a soft knock on the door. Come in, I said. Mom came into the room bearing gifts of a tray of chocolate chip cookies and a glass of milk. She placed the tray on the nightstand. How are you enjoying it here? Mom asked as she sat next to me on the bed. I'm very happy. Then she said something that sounded a bit off. You know that you're now a part of the family, and in families, we need to look out for each other. Sometimes that looks like sacrificing a part of ourselves to help other members of the family. Before I could respond, she kissed me on the forehead and exited in the bedroom. The next day around 4 p.m., Mom turned to me and said, Tiffany, honey, I need you to get dressed. Dad and I have an outing that we would like to take you on. I was excited. We really had not been to anywhere besides the supermarket, and I was happy to see walls other than that of the house. We left the house around 5:15 p.m., and my excitement faded when I realized the tension that filled the space within the car. I felt as though something was wrong or was about to go wrong. After a very quiet 2-hour drive, we finally pulled into the parking lot of St. Andrew's Private Hospital. I followed my parents in, and they led us to a room that held one patient. The person in the bed was hooked up to tubes and machines. I recognized her as the girl in the photo. She was Zakaya, Mom and Dad's daughter. I gasped. All this time I assumed she was dead. Why didn't they ever mention her to me? A man in a long white coat walked into the room and interrupted my thoughts. The doctor said, This must be Tiffany. You are doing such a great thing. A great thing? What great thing am I doing? I asked with a puzzled expression on my face. He looked at me and said, You don't think that giving one of your kidneys to Zakaya is a great thing? Mr. and Mrs. Craig were very lucky to find a match. I placed my hand over my mouth and gasped as my eyes grew wide in disbelief. When I did speak, my voice shook. A kidney? Nobody told me anything about a kidney. You must be mistaken. I'm Tiffany, Mr. and Mrs. Craig's adopted daughter. I'm not a kidney donor. The doctor turned to Mr. and Mrs. Craig as he completely ignored the words that were just spoken and said, We have Tiffany's room all prepared. Zakaya is able to do another surgery, so the surgery will take place tomorrow. He nodded to my parents and exited the room. Mom, please don't let them do this to me, I pleaded. Mrs. Craig was no longer the sweet, loving, adopted mom that I knew and grew to love. In her place stood a cold and harsh woman who grabbed my shoulders roughly and snarled, You have 2 choices, Tiffany. You can 1, do the surgery, or 2, Go back to the orphanage and let them put you in another foster home, and this time, I'll make sure that you stay there. She let go of my shoulders and smiled at me as the nurse entered the room. Remember, we are now family, and family makes sacrifices for its members. As I sat in the hospital bed dressed in hospital garb, tears flowed. I decided to do the surgery. I did not want to go back to foster care. If giving a kidney meant that I would never have to go back, then I guess I was left with no choice. The next morning, I was wheeled into the operation room around 5 a.m. After surgery, I was in and out of consciousness. From the conversations I heard, the surgery was successful and everyone thought I was such a great little girl for doing what I did. Zakaya had been searching for a kidney match for 3 years, and finally it happened. I also knew that I was not the only child that gave a kidney to Zakaya. About 2 weeks after surgery, I was allowed to go home. However, I wasn't allowed to go back to the room that I previously occupied. I was taken to a much smaller room that held a dresser, a bed, and a desk and chair, and luckily a computer. I was home most of the time, alone, since the Craigs were in the hospital with Zakaya. One night, right before going to bed, I took my painkillers and settled under my blankets. I swore I saw movement outside my window, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I closed my eyes and drifted off into a dreamless sleep. Being home after the surgery exposed that the Craigs already got what they wanted from me. The love and affection that I once got was no longer there. Once Zakaya was in the clear, my new family completely forgot about me. It also meant that privileges such as watching TV with the family and even going out to dinner with the family was no more. I now became the outcast. This meant I spent most of my time in my room, surfing the web and watching movies. I only left my room when it was necessary. It somehow became my solitude. Once when the Craigs went to dinner, I was in my room when I heard a tap, tap, tap coming from the window behind my drawn curtains. At first I thought it was a figment of my imagination, but the tapping got louder and faster. My eyes grew wide, and I felt as though I was going in slow motion as I moved ahead to the curtain to see what was behind it. My hands grabbed the curtain and quickly pulled it to the side to see what was making the noise. Mr. Craig's face behind me startled me. Tiffany, why are you still up? You should be in bed. I jumped to fight, and a quick scream escaped my lips. I placed my hand to my chest to steady my racing heart. I thought I heard something coming from outside. It's probably the wind shaking the window panes. Mr. Craig smiled at me. He handed me a disposable food container and then winked at me before leaving the room. If it wasn't for the small, humane gestures of Mr. Craig from time to time, living with the Craigs would have been unbearable, especially since Zakaya inherited her mother's charming demeanor. Over the next few months, I felt as though someone was constantly looking over my shoulder, but every time I turned around, nobody was there. So walking to and from school was quite nerve-wracking. Once while heading home from school, I guess I zoned out because one minute I was crossing the road and next I was being tackled to the ground before a car zoomed past. Before I could regain my senses and thank the person who saved my life, they just disappeared. One evening while watering the plants, I heard a noise from behind the tree. Now, if you are thinking that I went to check out what that noise was, I didn't. I dropped the watering can and ran inside the house. The Craigs were out for me, so I ran to the house, ran to get all the way to the or rather hoped, Mr. Craig would walk in like last time, but that didn't happen. I peeked behind the curtain and I was astonished to see what was outside my window making the tapping sound. It was a woman. My jaw dropped. It was a woman who looked just like me, but of course older. She wore a black coat with a hoodie. Mustering all my courage, I moved the curtain to one side and looked at the reflection of myself outside the window. The woman smiled and I noticed tears swell in her eyes. Hi, Tiffany, she said. I'm your mother. She said she got pregnant when she was 16. On the day that her baby was born, her mother placed the baby up for adoption. She said that she had been looking for me for years, but every time she found me, I had already left the foster care I was in. It was a lot to take in. After our nightly cap by my bedroom window, she said goodbye, and that she would see me soon. Over the next few weeks, my mother and I got acquainted. We knew that they would never award her full custody of me since she did not make enough money. After 3 years of being mistreated, I ran away from the Craigs and went to live with my mother. That night while sleeping out of my bedroom window, Mr. Craig entered my room. I was frozen with fear, thinking he would raise an alarm. He smiled at me and nodded, and I smiled back, and I slipped out the window to go meet my mother. Nobody came after me or came looking for me. No alerts were put out. It seemed as though I became a ghost. I had been living with my mother about 7 years when we were heading out of town. Along the way, we saw a crowd along the road, and we found out that there was an accident. My mom and I stepped out of the car because the road was blocked, so we couldn't pass anyway. As they were placing people on the stretchers, I recognized that it was the Craigs. I really had mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I wanted to be empathetic, but on the other hand, I was like Karma was serving her dish today. Then my thoughts ran on about Mr. Craig and how he made my stay a little better while I lived with him. I asked a paramedic which hospital they were being taken to. Once I got my answer, I asked my mom if we'd go to the hospital, and she said no problem. When we got to the hospital, we entered and spoke with the receptionist. My mother told her that we were family with the Craigs and that we would like to be updated on their status as soon as possible. The receptionist nodded and asked us to wait in the waiting area. After about 3 hours, the doctor came out. "Family members of the Craig family?" he said. My mom and I stood up and answered, "Yes." "I'm sorry to say that we lost Nakaya and Juliet in surgery," he said. "How is Mr. Craig?" I blurted out. "He'll be fine. We had to put pins in his legs. He has 2 broken ribs and a mild concussion, but he will be okay. You can come back tomorrow when he's allowed visitors," the doctor said. My mother and I thanked him and exited the hospital. The next day, we visited the hospital, and I walked in with flowers for Mr. Craig. He apologized for what his wife did to me all those years ago, and he thanked us for coming by to visit him. That one visit turned out to be many visits. My mom and I helped Mr. Craig any way we could, including helping him to and from therapy once he got out of the hospital. He and my mom got close, and 5 years later, they are about to get married. My life may not have started off the best, but it's not where you start. It's where you allow yourself to end up. Hi, I'm Maria from Chile. Before I tell you my amazing story, please click like and subscribe. When I was 3 years old, I realized that the only smart person in my family was Mom. She was the only one who understood me. My dad and my older sister Elena seemed to be super dumb. One time, Mom had left an apple pie on the counter, and the smell was driving me crazy. I couldn't reach it, so I ran over to Dad and said, "Dad, bye!" Okay, bye. No, bye. Yes, bye. Me? Bye! Oh my god, what am I saying? Idiot. Bye, bye. See me waving my hand? Go away. Bye. I burst into tears and threw his slipper at him. Luckily for me, Mom came in just then. "You want pie, honey? Come with me." Mom realized that I had some trouble with my speech because I mixed up sounds and words. But Dad was just really mean about it. He said that girls should be perfect, and if not, they should be boys. One day, Mom took me to this nice doctor she worked for as a maid. He offered to give me free speech sessions for some months, and after that, I couldn't stop talking in perfect sentences, which also annoyed my dad. Girls are meant to be seen and not heard, so shut up. Soon after I turned 5, Mom announced at dinner that she'd enrolled me in a school. Are you crazy? I'm not wasting money on her school. You don't even have a job. I've been saving money for Maria, and she is going. She couldn't even speak properly till like forever. Wake up, Mom. She's stupid. But Mom completely ignored them, and I was off to school the next day. Of course, Dad and Elena became even bigger jerks. Once I told Dad he'd spelled his name wrong on a school form, and he yelled at me. Oh, you think you're smarter than your dad now? This is not a mistake. I was planning to change my name tomorrow. Wow, that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But to be honest, I didn't think I was smart. I didn't understand most of the stuff we were studying in school. Once in the 5th grade, the teacher asked me why I hadn't done my worksheet. I'm sorry, miss. My mom made me a sandwich last night, and I needed a tissue, but we didn't have any, so I rolled the worksheet around it, and it was the best sandwich I ever had. Want me to bring you some? The teacher looked at me like I was crazy. Everyone started laughing, and someone yelled, "Gosh, she's dumb." Yeah, thank God she's pretty. Well, yes, thank God for that.
Boys were always trying to flirt with me as I grew older, which didn't sit too well with some girls. Once in the 7th grade, I was blocked in the corridor by Elena and her mean best friend, Amanda. Listen, Maria, I'm sick of hearing my crush talking about how pretty you are, so I need you to go and tell him how dumb you are, okay? Yeah, just open your mouth and something stupid will come out for sure. That's what happens when you have an empty trash can instead of a brain. As the two laughed, I tried to push Amanda aside, but I swear I didn't remember I had a pencil in my hand. And she let out a very loud scream. The principal called my parents and let me off with a warning, but Dad lost it.
That's all she gets? I knew this school was for losers. This girl is insane and useless, and I'm putting her in a zoo.
The only person who's useless in our house is the one who sits and eats all day and hasn't earned a penny in 10 years.
Wait, are you talking about me? You suck. Good luck with your dumb daughter.
With that, Dad left us for good, and our lives became better. I wish he'd taken Elena too. I had a secret I really wanted to hide from her. You see, since I wasn't good at anything, I randomly signed up for the school's music club. But it turned out I was really good at singing. Now I was spending even less time studying and was learning songs instead. If Mom found that out, she would kill me. In the 8th grade, I was chosen to sing 3 songs on our cultural day, and I was so excited, I started singing.
Who run the world, girl?
I clapped my hands on my mouth. Why did I sound like a freaking man? I cleared my throat and started again.
Who run the world, girl?
And there it was, this deep, manly voice I'd never heard before. What was wrong with me? As everyone started laughing, I ran off the stage and went home in tears. I skipped school the next day, pretending to be sick. Later that evening, Elena came to my room with a food tray. Aw, poor Maria. Here, I got you some hot soup for your throat. Oh, thank you. Maybe it'll help you sound less like a man. You heard me? I wish. It wasn't fair, but it's all anyone in this school can talk about. So what are you now, Maria or Mario? Shut up, Elena. Hey, watch it. Because if I tell Mom you've been spending all your time singing with other losers, she's gonna take you out of school. Now, where's that sweater of yours I really love? And with that, she picked it up and walked out. She was such a witch. The next morning when the bell rang, I opened the door to find my music teacher outside. I immediately pulled her into the coat closet to hide her from Mom. Miss, you have to go. My mom can't find out I've been singing. But my teacher insisted that my voice was special, and I had to come back to school to join a competition. She wouldn't leave till I said yes. When I went back to school, I was the butt of all the mean girl jokes. Suddenly, the boys wanted much to do with me either.
Hey Mario, can you return that love poem I wrote for you? I want to give it to a real girl. I'm canceling our date, but you can come watch the game with me and the guys at boys' night.
As I sat down in the corner to eat alone, Elena and Amanda walked over to me. Wow, I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be sitting alone. Aw, we'll have lunch with you. And with that, Elena dumped a whole plate of spaghetti on my head. OMG, what is wrong with you two? Why do you hate me so much? Oh, you need a reason? I'll give you 100. Number 1, you are dumb, but pretty. And the other 99 are the same. You're even dumber than I am because all you want is the attention of some stupid boys. Well, they're all yours. Go marry them. Have their idiot babies. Whatever you do, just leave me alone. I stormed out of there angrily. I was walking down the hallway when I heard my favorite song from the music room. It was my teacher on the piano, and I started to sing along. And this time, it was just my usual voice. After that, I started training with my teacher for the competition, and she taught me how to tune both my voices to perfection. She was convinced I would win with my unique talent. But one day, when I was alone at home, I was practicing in my room when suddenly, Mom barged in.
Where's the boy?
What boy? Mom, the boy who was just singing that cheesy song to you, and you were singing it right back. Stop acting, Maria. I heard you both. I had no choice but to tell Mom about my singing and the dual voices. Just then, Elena came in and Mom was super mad at us both.
I don't break my back cleaning people's toilets, so you can go and be a dumb singer, Maria. I'm going to take you out of school if you keep getting such bad grades. And you, Elena? You knew all along and you hid this from me? You're both grounded for a week.
No matter how much we protested, Mom wouldn't hear another word. There was no way I was missing that competition. A few days later, I sneaked out and went to the birthday of the $1,000 check. And that was a lot of money in my country. Mom couldn't do anything else. And I got home, I was in for a shock. There were 5 men around.
This house isn't yours anymore. Your husband mortgaged this property long ago, and we're taking over now. Get out.
Before we knew it, all our things were out on the street, and so were we. We were homeless, all thanks to the worst dad on the planet. We camped out in a nearby park for the night. As we lay down to sleep on some benches, I went to Mom and took out the check from my pocket. Mom, I went to the competition and won first prize. You can take this to the bank tomorrow, and we can pay for a place to stay till we figure out something. Mom looked shocked, and then she hugged me tight. Oh, Maria, this will really help me right now, so thank you. Come, sing for me. I want to hear you. Just then, I heard some sweet flute music from the distance, and I started singing that song in my style.
Now that it's raining more than ever, know that we'll still have each other. You can stand under my umbrella. You can stand under my umbrella. Ella, Ella, eh, eh, eh.
When I opened my eyes, Mom looked stunned. Suddenly, we spotted an old man running towards us, holding a flute in his hand.
Wow, you're such an amazing talent. I've never seen someone singing like that. Who are you? And why are you here?
I told him we'd suddenly become homeless, and he immediately offered us a place in his house. When we got there, our jaws dropped open. It looked like a millionaire's mansion. I went to sleep on the biggest, softest bed I could ever imagine. In the morning, we discovered that the old man was a millionaire who came from a family of musicians. And what he said next left me shook.
I own my own music production company, Maria, and I want to give you a record deal. You're going to take the world by storm, I'm telling you.
Of course, I had to take up the offer. As Mom and I jumped for joy, Elena suddenly hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. Oh, my beautiful, talented sister. I knew you were special from the day you were born. I had to make a huge effort not to punch her face. I instantly shot to fame with my debut single, and suddenly, I was the talk of the city. In a few months, I was able to afford our own place and move out of the kind man's mansion. I hired house help for Mom and decided to enroll Elena and myself in a better school. But Elena was super jealous, and she couldn't hide it anymore. I don't need your charity, you dumb witch. I hate you. Always have, always will. I have a boyfriend now, and I'm moving out to live with him. And just like that, she left. And well, I can't say I miss her. I have my huge fans around the world to make it up to me.
You may have my mother fooled, but I never liked you. My fists clenched as I looked Omar squarely in the eyes.
And your mother is the only person that counts.
His lips curved slightly at the corners. I know that it was you.
It was me, but who's going to believe you? It's your word against mine.
His eyes darkened. We heard a gasp and turned towards it. Hey, my name is Riley. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tap that notification bell. Let's get back to the story. I had a pretty good life till my sister was born. It was just Mom and I since my father had left when I was just 5 years old. He told Mom he was headed to the newsstand around the corner, but he never came back. For months, Mom looked for him, but I guess after a while, she just assumed he was dead. Years passed and Mom didn't date much. When she did, she'd always come home sad and eat a tub of ice cream and watch Casablanca. Our relationship was pretty solid though. She always made time for me and told me she would always be there anytime I needed her. When I was around 12, Mom began dating again, and she was genuinely happy. His name was Timothy. I watched as my once shy mom became confident and tried new things. I loved Timothy just as much as she did. After 2 years of dating, Timothy popped the question, and soon after they were married. A few months later, Mom announced that she was pregnant, and we were all excited about the new addition to the family. One night on his way home from work, Timothy was shot and robbed of his vehicle. He was announced dead by the time he got to the hospital. Mom and I were devastated. Mom was hospitalized a few days later. She was in her 3rd trimester and the doctors were worried about her and the baby. Aunt Vanessa, Mom's sister, took time from work and stayed with me while Mom was in the hospital. Finally, Mom delivered a healthy baby girl. She named Chloe and was discharged from the hospital. Aunt Vanessa went back home and I thought life would go back to normal. Boy, was I wrong. Mom became obsessed with Chloe. She would sit in a chair and watch her sleep. As soon as Chloe cried, Mom scooped her up, and yes, Mom even went to the bathroom with her. I figured, okay, maybe Mom hasn't done this in a while and it's just a phase. No, it wasn't, because 2 years later, Mom was still obsessed. She said that Chloe was her only link to Timothy and she needed to keep his memory alive. You know what happened to me over those 2 years? I became invisible to Mom. I tried for her to notice me. Heck, even have a proper conversation, but I could never get her attention. I dyed my hair, got fake tattoos, and changed the way I dressed. One time, I even brought a guy home after school, and we made out in the living room. But did my mother care? No, she didn't. After many failed attempts, I gave up and went back to the old me. So imagine my surprise when I came home one afternoon from school and I saw a strange man sitting in the living room with Mom and Chloe. Hi. I glanced at Mom, then the stranger. Mom blushed and cleared her throat.
Riley, this is Omar. We've been dating for a few months. I thought it was time the both of you met.
Omar stood.
Hi, Riley. Your mom told me so much about you.
And yet, she hasn't told me anything about you.
Riley!
Mom's face turned cherry red. I have homework to do. If you need me, I'll be in my room. How could Mom find time for a man, but she can't find time for me? I thought to myself as I walked to my room. As the days went on, Omar spent more time at the house, until he was there every single day. I watched as Chloe smiled and played with him. She looked so comfortable around him. I later found out that Omar was a police officer. While Mom and Chloe were mesmerized by Omar, something about him didn't feel right. He always tried to make conversation with me and brought home gifts for Chloe and I, but I wasn't buying it. Mom looked happy and I didn't want to say anything until I had proof that he was a scumbag. One night, I overheard Omar telling Mom he had to go out of town for a few days. I was relieved. I secretly wished that he would never return. A few days later, Mom approached me nervously while I was watching television with Chloe in hand.
Riley, can you watch Chloe for me? I just have to quickly run to the pharmacy.
Mom, are you actually leaving Chloe at home?
Yes, Omar said that Chloe was old enough to be without me for a while. I just need to take baby steps.
Mom handed Chloe over to me.
And don't forget to keep the door locked so Chloe doesn't go outside.
I nodded. Mom turned and walked away. I put on Chloe's favorite show and we watched it together. About 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I got up from the sofa and left Chloe watching her show. I walked to the door and opened it.
Hi, I have a package for Riley Weatherman.
That's me. The delivery man handed me the package. It came from Auntie Vanessa. I signed for the package and closed the door. When I got to the TV room, Chloe was no longer there. Chloe! I called as I went from room to room. My heart raced as I checked cupboards and under beds. Chloe was nowhere to be found. Chloe, if you come out, I'll give you ice cream. As I walked to check the other parts of the house, I noticed the front door was slightly opened. I yanked open the door and raced outside, frantically looking around. Just then, Mom pulled into the driveway. She jumped out of the car.
Riley, what's wrong?
Mom, I'm so sorry. It's Chloe. Mom pushed past me and ran into the house calling Chloe's name. Within 15 minutes, police cars were parked outside the house. They questioned me as they tried to find out what really happened. I also heard Mom crying on the phone as she told Omar what was going on. It's my fault. I forgot to lock the door, I cried.
I trusted you. I trusted you.
Mom rushed towards me, but 2 officers held her back. They took her to another room to calm down. If anything happens to Chloe, I will never forgive myself. That evening, a group of neighbors rallied together and looked for Chloe. After 6 unsuccessful hours of searching, the neighbors said that as soon as it was morning, they would search again. That night, Mom didn't speak to me. She stayed in her room and cried. I stayed by the phone in the living room, hoping and praying that the police would call saying they found her. The next 2 days felt as though I was stuck in a nightmare that I wouldn't wake up from. On the third day, the doorbell rang. Mom went to open it, which was followed by a scream. I rushed to the door to see what had happened. There was a smiling Omar with Chloe in Mom's arms. "Oh, Chloe!" I wanted to hold her, but Mom wouldn't let me. Omar walked into the house and closed the door.
Your sister could have been seriously hurt, Riley. It's a good thing she was found safe.
Where did you find her?
Mom hugged Chloe tightly.
Someone heard whimpering in one of the tunnels at the playground and called it in.
So, you mean to say Chloe was in the tunnels for the past 3 days?
It seems so.
Omar took Chloe's hand in his, but she pulled it away and turned her head from him. So then why isn't she at the hospital? What did she eat and drink over the past few days? And what are those bruises on her legs? Mom looked at the bruises.
Your sister made it to the park. She's bound to have bruises.
Omar stared at me.
Your mother almost lost Chloe because of your carelessness, and you're standing there asking silly questions?
Omar's right. He did the right thing by bringing Chloe to me. Now come on, Chloe. Let me take you to Dr. Bratt to make sure everything's okay.
After Mom, Omar, and Chloe returned from the doctor, Mom said that Chloe was healthy and the bruises on her legs would heal without a problem. The next morning, I noticed a ring on Mom's hand. She told me that Omar proposed to her the night before and she accepted. I told Mom that something didn't feel right about Omar, and maybe she should get to know him a bit more. But of course, being an adult, she ignored me and told me I didn't know what I was talking about. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed a drastic change in Chloe's behavior towards Omar. Chloe no longer ran to Omar when he came to her. She whimpered and ran away whenever he came close. Mom, however, seemed oblivious. Since she was on cloud 9 planning her wedding, one afternoon while I was watching TV, Omar came over. Mom was trying to get Chloe to stay with Omar, but she wasn't having it. She kicked and screamed. Mom just brushed it off, saying Chloe needed a nap. Not able to stand it anymore, I grabbed Chloe from Mom's hand and she immediately settled down. "How can you be so blind?" I screamed. "Omar didn't find Chloe in the park. He was the one that took her. That's why she wasn't dehydrated when she came back home. But I guess you are willing to overlook a few things just to have a boyfriend." Omar glared at me, then turned and calmly spoke to Mom.
I've never been so insulted in my life. I'm an officer of the law. I protect people, not harm them. I think this is my cue to leave. I'll call you later.
With that, Omar left the house. Mom yelled at me to go to my room and not to come out until she told me to. After staying away for a few days, Omar returned with flowers for Mom and gifts for Chloe and me one afternoon. Apparently, Mom thought inviting Omar for lunch was a great idea, but what it really was the turning point in all our lives.
Oh no.
Mom turned to me while I was feeding Chloe crackers in the kitchen.
I have to run over to Ruth's to get my blender. I'll be right back, okay?
I nodded and Mom left. Mom never left us alone with Omar. I saw this as an opportunity to make him confess to taking Chloe. I took Chloe and placed her in my room with a few toys, closed the door, and walked to the TV room where Omar was watching a movie. "You did it, didn't you?" I stood in front of the TV. Omar's eyes slowly met mine.
Excuse me?
"You took Chloe. You probably never even went away. You were just looking for a perfect time to make your move, then swoop in like a hero and propose to Mom." Omar stood up slowly.
You really think I would go through all that trouble?
Omar stood directly in front of me. "You may have my mother fooled, but I never liked you." My fists clenched as I looked Omar squarely in the eyes.
And your mother is the only person that counts.
His lips curved slightly at the corners. "I know that it was you."
It was me, but who is going to believe you? It's your word against mine.
His eyes darkened. We heard a gasp and turned towards it. There stood Mom with a horrific look on her face.
Omar? Did you take Chloe?
Mom's voice cracked.
Baby, why would I harm Chloe?
He walked over to Mom and tried to take her hand, but she pulled away.
How could I be so stupid? The evidence was right there all the time. What kind of a mother am I? Omar, you need to leave.
But baby...
Omar, leave now.
Omar laughed.
I'm not going anywhere. You were wearing my ring.
Mom took off the ring and threw it at him. Omar picked it up and looked like he was about to slap Mom across the face. "Mom!" I screamed as I ran towards her. Omar raised his hand to hit Mom, but I tackled him to the floor. Everything happened so fast. I was able to deal him a few punches, but he also hit back hard. I heard glass shatter. Mom stood over a now hunched Omar who was holding his head. She held Chloe's hand.
Riley, let's go.
We ran out of the house and went to Ruth's. Mom told her what happened. She told me to close all the windows in the house while she called the police. By the time police arrived, the only thing left at the house was a trail of blood. Mom and I gave statements, and Mom also told them that she believed he was the one that took Chloe. Mom apologized to me for not listening, and she hoped that I could forgive her. Of course I did. She's my mom. We stayed by Ruth for a few days as Mom upgraded our security at home just in case Omar decided to show up. Both of us also decided to take self-defense classes. It took months before Mom was back to her old self. She was now laughing again and not looking out the window every 10 minutes. Eventually, we decided to move so that we could completely put that part of our lives behind us. Sadly, the police never caught Omar. That Christmas at the new house, I received a Christmas card. There was no postage or no return address. When I opened the card, it had 3 words written inside. Thinking of you. I knew it was from Omar. I didn't tell Mom anything because she had been through enough. To date, I have received 3 cards like this every Christmas. I recently signed up to be in the police academy. I refuse to live in fear, and I will do whatever needs to be done to protect my mother and sister.